Hi, welcome to another demonstration for the Unitrends System Administration course. In this how-to video tutorial, we're going to take a look at ongoing administration. We're going to check for outstanding alerts, backup errors, storage issues, and see if we still have any active jobs running that shouldn't be. Maybe they're taking too long to back up. We're also going to review reports for issues or patterns in the protection summary, capacity, backup history, and the data reduction reports. We're also going to take a look at setting up retention goals and limits. Once again, it starts here in our lab or your environment. Once again, you don't have to log into these appliances every day. You're going to be emailed some of these same reports that I'm going to send to you. The details are in some of these same reports. So you don't have to log in every day. But when you do log into your system, once again, the first thing that you're always going to check for is make sure you don't have any outstanding alerts that you may need to address. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the little alert symbol. It's either going to be green, yellow, or red, depending on what type of alerts you need to pay attention to or address in the alert section. You can also see down here at the bottom that you can view more alerts. This is actually pulling up the alerts history report. You can sort by the severity, or I like to sort by the time, so I make sure I'm looking at my newest alerts at the top of my list here. There's all kinds of different alerts. You just need to make sure you're paying attention to any alert that says the severity is a critical alert. You'll see here that my storage was offline at one point here. You can see I've got some client no longer listening alerts. Those are critical. If your client's down, we can't see it. We tell you about that right away. You can also use this report to sort out different types of alerts. Maybe you're looking for disk alerts, you're looking for some sort of storage alerts. You can go back and start to filter on some of these different types of alerts that might be in here as well too. There's the alerts for all the clients. You can see that the client is no longer listening. You can also notice over here that they're resolved. If it is resolved, the issue's been addressed either by the system or yourself, it will flip this over to a true status. So really, if you want to make sure you're looking at anything that's still outstanding, one of the first things you might want to do is filter over here on false. These are all outstanding alerts still on the system today. Also, back on your dashboard, when you first log in, you also want to make sure you're checking for any outstanding errors. Once again, this week I've caused a bunch of errors, so I made sure I had some things in here to go over and show you some examples in here. You can see these are your backup failures directly. I usually try to sort it by some sort of end time or start time in here, whatever these columns you want to use to make sure you're bringing up your newest failures at the top of your list as well. Once again, you can use any of the filtering options that are up here at the top. So if you're looking for a particular client name, maybe you have failures on a particular client, you can sort those failures out. You can also go into these details and it will bring you up more details about the exact failure. Here's where you can start to go through and really see exactly what you might need to do to correct the issue. Here it appears that the database you're attempting to back up no longer exists or it's offline. So I'd go to my SQL server and check the status of those databases. This isn't a Unitrends issue, this is more of a SQL server issue. And we report on those issues too. That's the errors on the SQL server. I have a lot of different errors in here. This is not a troubleshooting course. Now also back here on your dashboard, you also want to make sure you're paying attention to any active jobs that you may have down here still running. You can also go into your active queue and take a look at those jobs. These are backup copy hot jobs that are pending and sitting in my queue. We're going to talk about why these are here in just a few minutes. But really you want to go in here and make sure you don't have any backups that are still running that shouldn't be. Is there one that's in the queue that's been running for 6, 7, 10, 12 hours that should have finished a long time ago? Make sure your backups are finishing in a timely manner. The other thing I wanted to show you is actually over here in my dashboard. You'll notice that I have plenty of storage on my local internal storage here on my local source. One of the reasons that my hot copies are actually not working right now is you can see here when I log into the dashboard on my target, I can actually see the target storage. It's reporting a warning that it's almost full. So I do want to show you really quickly that over in Hyper-V to resolve that issue. This is a virtual appliance. I could go to the back side of this appliance, add in under the settings, new storage for this machine. So what I'm going to do is add a new virtual disk into this virtual machine. Then we'll go to the Unitrends side and we'll show you how to add that and resolve this issue real quick. Now, once again, this process is the same for Hyper-V as it is for VMware. All right, just the backside of going to your virtual appliance, wherever it's hosted, and adding in a new virtual disk. We want to go ahead and put this virtual disk right in there with my target. We'll just call it the new virtual disk. We'll go ahead and I'm only going to create 50 gigs just to show you this process here. This will take just a few minutes to create this disk, then we'll show you how to add it to Unitrends, and we'll see this space go up here, alleviating this storage issue. Once again, on physical Unitrends appliance, you have to either look at excluding or backing up less data, or forklifting that appliance out and putting a new appliance in place. So once it's done inside of the appliance, we're going to go to the configure section over here. We're going to go to the configure area. We go to the appliances at the top, and you want to make sure you're highlighted on your target appliance, because that's the appliance we're adding this storage to. Make sure you're on the same appliance on the back side you just added that storage, whether it's VMware, Hyper-V, Zen Server. Now down here at the bottom under the storage area, if I want to add a separate storage pool, then I can add it to the attached, or I can add attached, and when I refresh or rescan this, you'll see the new drive show up in here for that appliance. Now, I don't want to create a separate storage pool. I want to expand the internal. I want to give this internal drive 50 more gigs. So I'm going to edit this disk, internal disk, and over here you'll see that there's a 300 gig drive. We want to refresh down here. All right, so once you refresh this over here, you'll see the new 50 gig drive show in, and you'll see that it's not a part of the file system and it's not partitioned yet. Right? We want to take that new 50 gig allocation and we want to add it to our existing 350 gig disk. So when we add this to that drive size, you'll notice now that our drive size becomes 350 gigs, and that new storage is automatically added to the backup storage on the appliance, and eventually you'll see this warning go down here and it'll show the new space and new drive. Now let's take a look at a few key reports in the system that might help you identify critical areas of concerns or certain patterns that you may want to look for inside of your appliance interface. If we go into the reports section, you'll notice there's tons of reports out here, and they're broken up by categories. There's the backup category, recovery, backup copy, appliance, and storage. All that stuff we learned in the administration module itself. Now the key report you can actually get through from the dashboard, and it's the protection summary. You can actually get to it by clicking on either not protected or protected, as we've shown you in the other modules. Now here you can see I'm running the report from my target, and the target's not doing any local backups, so nothing shows in this report. You need to make sure that you run the protection summary from your local appliance. Here's my protection summary report for my local appliance. If I go back to my target and I run the protection report manually from my target, you'll notice here that you can actually choose the appliance you want to run the report for, so you can run it from your target if you choose the correct appliance. As we've shown you in the earlier modules, these reports can be sorted and isolated out. If you want to look at all the servers you have backups for in the last 7 days, you can start to funnel and sort those types of assets out. You can also look for any details based on each asset, the current backups that they have in retention, the number of successful backups in the last 7 days, any warnings or failures that you might need to address as well too. Now actually I ran this report for just today's date. So if I actually go back to the report section and I change this date range to go back a little bit farther, you'll see more detail in this protection summary report. The date range does matter when you run these reports. There's also the capacity report. It's under the appliance category and capacity report. You'll notice you can run it on different appliances. There is no date range. This report, once again, I talked about it in the ongoing admin module itself. This is your newest full for everything you have before deduplication, before compression. And you can sort and filter if you're looking for certain assets to see how big their backup capacity is. The higher this number gets on a physical appliance, the less retention you'll have. Same thing with a virtual appliance. The one benefit of the virtual appliance we learned is that you can add more storage on the fly if you have it available to your hosts. Physical appliances, once again, the more you back up, the less retention you'll have on that appliance. At some point, you may have to forklift or buy another appliance and run them in parallel. There's also the backup history report, which is really great for showing backup times, elapsed time, and statuses. It's a complete history of all the backups. This report's once again really useful for helping determine staggering your backups. If you take this report and sort it by the elapsed time and bring your largest backups to the top, you might start to see backups that either take way too long or backups that you may have to stagger to get better backup performance. Remember that concurrent connections share that connection with the appliance, and the more jobs I run at once, the slower each of those jobs will run on their own. If I only run one backup at a time, it's going to have full connection access to the appliance, and it will run a lot faster than running 2 jobs at a time or 3 or 4 jobs concurrently together. In the reports categories, there's also under the appliance where we found the capacity report, there's also the load report, which is really beneficial as well too. This will allow you to see the actual load of processor and memory that your appliance is using at different times throughout a period. If you see an appliance running in the constant high yellows or reds, you might think about adding more processor or memory or forklifting once again out to a bigger appliance. This is a great report to tell how your appliance is performing in an overall CPU load processor kind of respect. Under the storage category, there's also the storage and data reduction reports. Now the storage report is really cool because it shows you your history of growth every day, your new backups. I really like this report. Very simple and easy to read. There's also the data reduction report, which once again can be ran based on a time range. You also want to make sure you're choosing the right appliance if you have remote management turned on. Here's my data reduction report for my local backup source. You can see the green line is deduplication. My gold bar here is compression. You can see I'm deduplicating about 12 to 1 here at the highest points. And you can see my compression is about 3 to 1. All right, pretty cool, pretty easy report to go back and kind of see your track and trend of history of data reduction. In this report, you're really just making sure that it's not flatlined. If you see your deduplication not working, you'll see this green bar straight across the bottom. There are certain cases and instances where data reduction, data deduplication is turned off and not recommended in certain scenarios, and that may be normal. In a vast majority of our appliances, you're going to see data reduction and deduplication. If you see a flat line, something's wrong. Now let's take a look at setting retention. Once again, as we learned inside of the module for ongoing administration, that you can set retention goals and limits based on each asset. We also learned that you really don't want to set these retention goals before 30 to 45 days, before you build up enough retention for your minimums. But you can set these retentions based on each one of these individual assets or in groups. Let's go over to my local source here though. It's a lot easier to manage. We're going to go down to configure. We're going to go to protected assets. And if I want to set retention across all of my Exchange databases at once, I can highlight those 4 database objects and I can edit those 4 objects inside of the Satori interface. Down here at the bottom of this edit settings or edit asset settings here, you'll notice the retention area. You can manage retention policies out here. So if you want to keep backups for at least 45 days and you want to get an email alert if you go below 30 days, remember we learned that you want to avoid setting these no less than 8 days apart. Min minus max minus 1, if you set these for 8 difference, you'll get a synthetic backup every 7 days, whether you run your own manual weekly fulls or not. You also can set the max retention where it will purge at so many days. So if I want to try to keep this for 45 days, I can set it for 45 days so it will purge and it will not keep anything older than 45 days. Remember in that module, we also learned that these backups are kept in backup groups. So once that full gets older than 45 days, it will purge that entire backup group. When you save these settings in here, When you set these retention settings, you will notice in the console right away that now under the retention column, you can clearly see the limits and goals for these assets. You can do this down through any virtual environment, SQL, Exchange, SharePoint, even setting retention across Oracle objects as well too. Here I've got an Oracle instance. I could do the same thing here and set these to the exact same policy that I set earlier. I'm going to go ahead and keep these for 45 days if I can. I'll warn if I go less than 30, and I want to go ahead and purge if I'm over 45 as well too. Now some servers and some assets, remember, they're cattle, they're tier 3. You may not even want to keep 30 days on it. Let's say I've got my Win 7 desktop down here. It's a workstation. It's not under any compliance at all. To help keep retention for more assets, I can go ahead and say, let's just keep these for 21 days. Warn me if I go below 10 and purge these backups at 21 days. Now by lowering the retention and allowing for purging at 21 days on my Win 7 desktop, it allows more retention for everything else that is not set or set above 21 days. Very easy to set these retention limits, and once again now, as you start to set your retention, you're going to wait about 30 to 45 days, come in and set your retention so you don't get those email alerts right away all the time, and be realistic and set them for everything. Anything that does not have a retention, it's going to be kept in retention as long as it can. And when you start running short on space, if nothing is set for retention, it's the first to purge. By having no retention policy, it's always the first to purge. You're telling the system that I really don't care about keeping this backup, and if you need to, go ahead and purge it down so you can keep everything else with retention set within its limits and goals. Very important piece. So make sure you set them all if you do start setting retention. All right, so that's a pretty good overview for you for the ongoing administration.